have to take down a few panels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you can't go.
Yeah.
So you've never seen it?
Yeah, I can't see it. So,
Yeah, I know that feeling. Mine isn't that much smaller.
you lost power. The lights on. That's the outside.
That's our camera.
In there, right there. Visible. One of these colors.
Not that I need
It's actually, it's
You were traveling.
It was the last place we were going to. See if you have an open site somewhere or something. And they were like, it's like 30 people per week. So I pulled out the kids.
Thank you.
The next morning they called me and said, we got a site for you. Come on in."
Oh,
So I've been there ever since. That's the, on the left there, that's the front porch and the inside.
so then are you gonna continue going down?
Yeah,
I'm gonna put it in.
we're gonna live there during the,
So why are you looking?
we're gonna live there during the expansion. We're not gonna
Oh,
go there. We're gonna move out to Lake One fast so we get the hell out of here.
But you took way long later.
Yeah.
Like 10 days, 10 days. It'll take longer to dig and get the foundation.
We're extending the inside of the house. So the kitchen, the lower bathroom, the master bedroom, and the master bath are gonna go 10 feet into the addition. Redo the inside of the house. The zoning board was amazing. The only stipulations we had, my plan is having it up to first they said, no, there's no, just because this guy hasn't doesn't mean he's going to. Yeah. Power tools. Sometimes the school calls. If we're like doing So they're not gonna be too easy.
On the other side of where my pool used to be, it's probably this wide to the fence, so we may go with
When I saw her, she's getting up there, she's getting, no.
Sets the precedent in the neighborhood. So if you want to do something
No.
different board.
Said something.
Yeah. If some of it, if you snake shade, sometimes
This is all since August. Really, really good, does everything himself, that's
I trust to do it. They want to
I'd like to call a meeting to order. This is the June 14th, 2023 meeting of the Lowell Conservation Commission. We have some continued business to start. The first thing is an enforcement order that was issued to the City of Lowell for a violation on land adjacent to 52 Lawrence Drive along the bank of the Merrimack River. And trees were cut back, and we're in the middle of discussing this enforcement order. We've talked about it several times at different meetings, and we did get an opinion from an arborist a couple of meetings ago, and we have asked that the DPW director come and give us an update. Welcome.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you letting me have the time to come in tonight. I'm hoping that you're in receipt of the letter we also included. So we have now in place engaged an arborist, Coppinger Tree, who, as you can see, has given the opinion for this issue, and we're using them for any issues going forward, as any places where we have questions about tree removal or pruning and so on. It's a policy that we're going to follow going forward.
We do have a couple of new commissioners, which I'm not sure they were here when that opinion came out. Have you seen? No. Yes. So could we just briefly go over what he suggested, the arborist? What the arborist suggested, I believe, was to let the trees grow back naturally rather than do anything further with them at this time. And then as time goes on and certain leaders get to a certain height, he recommended taking those out rather than cutting them back halfway. At least that's my take on what the recommendation was.
The Coppinger Tree is here. Actually, if you have some specific questions for him, if you'd like, I can have them come up.
Oh, sure.
Great.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. We do have a couple of new commissioners that
Yeah, happy to answer
haven't read your report.
any questions again. It's a family business, so it's my father's company, and I work for him. I'm also a certified arborist, so I can answer any questions you might have. The recommendations were for not on a go-forward basis to remove, if the goal was to keep the height low, was to remove 1 leader like per year on a multi-stem tree. That way it would maintain the height going forward.
So there's a little bit of, question as to what the city is interested in doing versus the commission. The commission wants the trees to live,
Yes,
right? That's our goal here is to make sure that they live.
of course.
So, personally, I think it looks a little strange having those trees at that height. I would want to see those regrow and hopefully, thinned out in a manner that everybody can see the lit up bridge from their house.
Gotcha.
But this is my personal opinion, and only as a citizen, not as a board member. So, if the city is looking to get them to grow taller, what are the options here? Like, you just let them go, let them grow.
Yeah, so, to get them to grow taller, because of the way they were pruned currently, I think that's kind of a dicey situation. I think a lot of the new growth from this point up could become kind of weak. So, it would have to be managed going forward if we were to get them to grow taller. I think it's a bit of a wait and see what the growth pattern is like as they mature if you were to let them go. But I imagine that a lot of the new growth, it might be very bushy and not quite the best form.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't think the bushiness of the tree is really a concern. Assuming that we'll keep it at this height that it is now, right? It sounds like that's a healthier way to go forward.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
what do you recommend as far as, you know, we have the coppicing examples that you laid out in this report. I'm not sure. It seemed like there were some options though, as far as, you know, aesthetics, and if we're looking at only from a health perspective, what would you be your recommendation for a monitoring plan moving forward?
Can I ask some questions?
There he is.
Yeah, here's the man.
Is the third.
Good evening.
What's going on?
Evening.
Hi.
So the first question was about the height of the trees. Ideally, you know, so as the board, we only care about aesthetics. As the board, we only care about the health of the trees. Aesthetically, it would be cool to have these trees grow up to the height of the rest of the trees, but it doesn't sound like that's a reasonable option. And we should be looking at protecting the health of these trees at the current height that they're at. As far as the health of the trees goes, are we concerned about trimming back periodically, this coppicing technique, in order to promote healthy tree growth going forward?
Well, it's kind of a tricky balance, I guess, between trying to maintain the aesthetics, the natural aesthetics as you walk along the Riverwalk and the trees are on the riverside, so they have more of a natural look. One thought we had was that rather than try to shape the trees or keep them at a certain height, you could thin them out. A lot of the trees were multi-stemmed trunks, and they're river birch, and they're naturally they naturally adjust to storms and ice things where the tree will break off. It's almost like what's referred to as coppicing in Europe. So you could actually, instead of having as many trees, you could thin them out, like take a few stems out, and still have a natural looking tree, but not a top tree that would look unnatural walking along the walk. So that was one thought. And for the health of the trees?
Yeah, I mean, making sure these trees live is what is important to us. The city can decide the aesthetics with you and their, you know, cost management plan. We just want to make sure they stay alive. So that is the first requirement for our whatever management plan you guys put together going forward. There was the notes about fungus and making sure that in any of these large wounds that we have a maintenance and inspection plan for that.
The recommendations these days are not to treat any wounds on the trees. The general rule of thumb in tree pruning is to not to take too much off at any one time, which is generally looked at as more than 25% of the overall green canopy of the tree. And it didn't appear to me that had been done. When you exceed that, then you risk jeopardizing the health of the tree. So at the time that I viewed the trees, it didn't look like more than what the tree would tolerate was taken off the tree, and that a tree's natural response is to repair itself. And in arboriculture today, they've realized that painting tree wounds and things actually can make things worse, so we don't recommend doing that. And because they're right on the water, I wouldn't recommend fertilizing them or anything, because whatever you put in the tree is going to end up in the river, really.
So, are you intending to put together a maintenance report for this work? Because it sounds like there's a little bit of future maintenance in order to keep these trees aesthetically looking like the way that we want them. How is this connection going to happen?
So our thoughts are that we would be able to revisit this periodically, get a status, bring Coppinger out, get their recommendation at this point. So it's all going to depend on how well they come back and how fast. So I have no problem at all forwarding that kind of a report on to the conservation to say, okay, these are the next steps. This is what we'd like to do at this point, if that makes sense to you.
What's your recommended maintenance inspection schedule for something like this? Is it yearly? Is it 6 months? Is it?
I'd say annually, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to look at them again. I should look at them as soon as possible now, just to look at them now that they're in full leaf and see that they are responding to the way that I would hope that they would be. And then each successive year, take a look at them and see how they are doing.
I'm good. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable plan with the new check-in and then annually. And then we'd like to be updated annually, right, when that happens, so.
Thank you both for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So what do we want to do with this enforcement order?
Well, it would seem that there's not going to be any further work done there at
Yeah.
the moment. Perhaps there would be work in a year. That doesn't make sense to keep an enforcement order
Yeah.
open for a year.
I think we can rescind it and then keep an eye on it, and if we need to, put out another enforcement order later, right?
I think that's our only option.
Yeah, I think
don't
that's
wanna
what we
leave it
can
on
do.
here.
So is that a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to rescind the enforcement order.
Seconded. Motion made and seconded to rescind the order, but be vigilant.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Moving on, we have a request for determination of applicability sent to us by David Hawk and Linda Ham, 116 West Street. They would like to cut down some trees within a buffer zone of a wetland. Are these folks here tonight? Okay, we did postpone this from our last meeting, hoping that the applicants could be here to discuss this with us. And I think we need to be really clear which trees they are and, you know, make sure that the stumps stay in the ground after the trees are cut. There is what looks to be almost a perennial stream, probably 10 feet away from these trees, if they're the trees I think they are. The trees are in poor condition and maybe somewhat dangerous, so I'm not opposed to taking some of them down, but I'm thinking perhaps we could ask the applicants to mark somehow with string or ribbon the trees that they're interested in taking down, so we can have a better look. And, you know, if it's impossible for them to come in, we could probably make a determination.
If I may, I just wanted to say that we did communicate to the applicant that they needed to come to this hearing, so they are aware that they are required to attend the hearing. I'm not sure why they're not here.
Okay. Well, if we could have a motion to postpone this, and if we could have some communication perhaps from the department to the applicant that I, for one, would like to see the trees marked. I have a pretty good idea of which ones they are because they're obviously, you know, not in good condition.
Sounds good to me.
And then we can take a look out there at our leisure and see which trees they are. I think there were probably 5 of them. They're not young trees, but just their age looks like they've suffered through some storms and various other calamities. So if we could have a motion to continue this to our next hearing date, please.
So moved.
And the next date would be July,
June 28th.
oh, June 28th, okay. Motion made to continue to June 28th. Seconded.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes unanimously. Now on to new business. We have a request for a certificate of compliance sent by Walter Chambers. The DEP file number is 206-0541. The address is 168 18th Street. And this certificate goes back to the original building of the house, from what I recall from your letter.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I'm Walter Chambers. I was an attorney in Lowell. I'm now retired last September. So I'm trying to clean up some stuff that's still outstanding. And I have an escrow account on this. I closed on this back in November 2003. And at the time, there was order conditions, and when I held some money in escrow that belonged to the developer. And nothing's been, I haven't heard from anyone, so I've taken the bull by the horn and basically requested a certificate of compliance that's more than 20 years. Also, in your order conditions, just on page 5, it says, you know, the order is valid for 3 years. So this is no longer basically a valid order of conditions. And so I'm requesting that the board issue a certificate of compliance.
Okay. The only special condition that I recall was the one about the granite posts. Are you aware if those granite posts are still in place?
I couldn't tell you. I was just a lawyer. I was the lawyer for the bank.
Yeah, I did try to go out there, and
Yes, so I don't go out and look at the properties, you know.
Yeah. I think we may possibly have another order on this same property. Fran, do you recall that?
What was that? Sorry.
I think we have another order, a more recent order on this same property. They wanted to do some
And
work
I think this
in the
property have-
backyard.
Backyard work, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah, the property seemed familiar to me.
yeah. I think, I'm not sure if it was an order of conditions or a request for determination, but they did request to do some planting and that sort of thing in the back of their yard, which wasn't a part of the first order. So I don't have an issue with issuing this certificate of compliance. Does anyone else have problems with it? So if we could have a motion to that effect, I think we'd be doing the right thing.
So moved.
Motion made to issue the certificate,
I'll second it.
seconded by Perry. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I believe it's unanimous. Thank you very much for coming in. It wasn't a very good night to travel.
Okay, thank you. I have a drive back to Maine.
Next, we have a notice of intent from Steve Marshall. The address is 191 Frida Lane. The DEP file number is 206082. They're seeking to construct an addition to their home within 100 feet of the wetland in the rear.
Just give me a second to set up. Okay, good evening. My name is Ian Ainsley. I'm an engineer from Meiser Brem. I'm joined tonight by Steve and Wanda Marshall, the applicant and property owner. This is an existing single-family house at 191 Frida Lane. They want to add an addition onto the back of the house. It's going to be a 3-car garage addition, and there will be a driveway extension to serve that garage. If you kind of look at the property, it's kind of narrow. It's about 75 feet wide. So they don't really have opportunity to expand sideways. The only place they could realistically expand is backwards. So that's kind of what they're doing. There is a flagged bordering vegetated wetland at the rear of the property. The addition would be about 43, I think, feet away. We do show some erosion control on the plan, filter sock to be placed for the whole time of the construction. We were just at the zoning board Monday night to get a variance for the floor area. We did receive that variance, so we're coming to you for our second permit. And we were also asked by the City Stormwater Committee to design a stormwater system to detain 1 inch of the roof. We have done that. It's underneath the driveway. We have a chamber system proposed that's sized to take the roof runoff and a bit of the driveway runoff through a trench drain along the garage. Those are plastic chambers, if you're familiar. They fill up, they're surrounded by stone, they infiltrate. Depending on how good your soil is, they infiltrate that into the ground, and then when they fill up, they'll overflow through an overflow pipe into the backyard. So that's the gist of what we're doing, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Well, the first thing that pops up when you look at that plan is the 43 feet, because I think probably the Conservation Office told you we have a rule, if you want to call it that, in the city of Lowell that we have not been allowing any construction within 50 feet of a wetland. And 43 sounds reasonable, but then the next person needs 8 feet rather than 6.5, and the person after that says, well, I only want 2 feet more, and pretty soon, you know, a 50-foot buffer zone from the wetland boundary becomes meaningless once you deviate from that 50-foot rule. You do have a considerable drainage easement. I looked at the plan for the subdivision that was built earlier, and that's a 30-foot wide drainage easement that goes behind those houses. At least 15 of that is probably on this property.
Yes. Yep.
And when you count that as perhaps your boundary of a wetland situation, now you're only about 20 feet from what we would be protecting as far as drainage and drainage easement situation.
Yeah, but I wouldn't think you would use the easement as a...
The what?
I wouldn't think you would count the easement as a resource area under the bylaw or
Well,
the act, you know?
I'm willing to go that way, but you're still 43 feet away, not 50.
Is that codified in your bylaw? Is that written anywhere? Because I wasn't aware of that.
This has been I can't think of what word you'd codify it by, but we have been sticking by this rule ever since I can remember, and I've been on the commission a long, long time.
Well, I guess I would ask, is there some sort of mitigation or alternative to allow for a reduced setback? Is there something they could do to improve the buffer that would kind of make up that 7 feet?
Well, that's what I would be expecting to see on a plan like this. I was surprised that it came in with 43, because we've been very strict about that.
I wasn't.
And we've got several building projects that are gone to DEP because we are sticking by that rule. And that's an option as well for you if you want to go there. But we do have jurisdiction within the entire 100-foot buffer, and half the house now is in the 100-foot buffer. So you're really pushing the envelope here as far as this property is concerned. It's, you know, it's not a little wet spot back there. I looked further down the way. It's got culverts even leading into this wet area, and it obviously at times probably has a visible drainage. I know it's called intermittent, which is probably correct. So, I mean, you just putting your own selves at risk getting that close to a protected drainage area. That's my opinion. I'll let someone else ask questions. I do have some questions about the plan as well, but let's hear from other people.
I mean, I think the stormwater's covered fine. I didn't have any problem with the design other than the distance. Saw the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, we just had a project recently that we had them completely move where the house was on a plot, because it's the same thing, it was the 50-foot, so, I don't, that's, next hope, I apologize that wasn't communicated to you, but that's been something we've been pretty strict about, especially in the last few years that I've been on the commission, so.
I do have a question about the drainage. It wasn't clear to me from the plan or from the narrative. It seemed that the roof drains went directly down into a trench around the building, but do they then go into the cul-de-sac or not?
Yes, so we put a trench drain along the front of the garage just because we're cutting a little bit, so it's kind of creating a little bit of a low spot right there. So the trench drain was intended to take some of that driveway, if anything, kind of heads toward the garage and capture that. And since we're putting in roof drains and there's going to be a trench drain right there, it made sense just to connect right into that and then connect both into the chamber system.
So what percentage of the storm water are you collecting in that way?
So it's sized for 1 inch of rain runoff from the total roof area, so both the existing house and the proposed roof.
And are you collecting the runoff from the driveway as well?
We are collecting the runoff. So it's about 2,100 square feet of roof area. If you do the 1 inch, that's about 200 cubic feet of runoff, and that's what we sized the chambers for. That's what the Stormwater Committee had requested. But that's static storage, so that's just the storage that's available in the chambers. As they infiltrate into the ground, you will kind of get a bit more volume because it'll be continuously depleting, so they can fit some of the driveway runoff.
And how quickly could you expect that to drain out of the chambers?
So we have a pipe coming out. It's coming out of the top of the chamber, so the thought is they would fill up first before they spill over. I know that a 2-year storm is typically about a 3-inch rainfall. So you have something sized here for, I would expect, about a 1-year storm. I don't know exactly how long it would take, time-wise, for it to fill up and spill out. I would expect at the very least a few hours.
I think I just heard you say that the driveway is collected in this system. Well, how is that? How does the water get into the system from the driveway?
Yeah, so right along the garage here.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a trench drain, so if you've ever seen like a catch basin grate, kind of the rectangular grate as you're driving along the road, it's the same thing except it's a long rectangle. Instead, you'll see them pretty often at the foot of a garage, kind of at the interface. So it's a long open grate, basically. My thought isn't that the whole driveway is going to get in there, but my thought is, if some goes toward the garage, instead of going in the garage, it'll have somewhere to go.
I read French drain.
Yep.
Thanks.
Sort of, yeah.
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 So that overflow pipe, is that just lying on the surface, or what
That would
does
be-
what
that
does
would
the
be-
outlet look like?
That would be buried. The pipe would come out. Typically when you see a pipe come out, a large pipe, you'd see like a head wall type thing. This will probably just daylight, it'll have some ground around it, but you'll just kind of see a pipe sticking out of the ground, basically.
And how do you prevent that from eroding?
You can put stone protection there. You can put like a riprap erosion control blanket there. I don't have one shown now, but we could certainly do that. I don't think there's a ton of water coming out of there. I don't expect, a high velocity, high quantity of water to be coming out of there. But there's no harm in putting a little bit of stone to break it up.
Hmm. Well, a 1-inch storm isn't much. I would expect that we'd have some storms bigger than that every now and again. I do have to put in a word for that magnificent oak tree. If you brought that building back a little,
The one thing my wife would
you know, I've never seen a healthier looking tree that close to a house.
Yeah, big.
And, you know, take another 6 feet off of that thing and leave the tree there would make me very happy.
I will say we aren't cutting any other trees. It is lawn back there. I do feel like it's worth mentioning.
That was the only one.
So we are
Maybe
proposing.
get one less car.
It is a beautiful tree.
Yeah, cutting back the addition, 10 feet. I know that probably might take away a carport, and that's tough for you, I would guess. But that gets you past the 50, probably might save the tree. I'm not sure. Construction, that's still pretty close to the edge, but just something to think about.
Anyone else like to ask any questions here?
Sorry?
What does our architect think?
So guys, I do have a custom vehicle. That's what the third spot is for, that I've built in 20 years. Yeah, her truck and my truck. Third spot's pretty important. Please. She's recently become handicapped, and we're trying to be able to get her inside, when she goes to get any groceries or anything with the garage. And just been in town 55 years. We'd like to stay. One of our things to build the addition was we were either going to redo the house like it is and sell it, and maybe move away. But she wants to stay, and it would be beneficial for us.
I see coming a lot of tough decisions with the city's new accessory dwelling unit law that they're discussing. And I can't tell you how many houses in the city of Lowell back up to wetlands or rivers or streams, and it's a tough decision unless you have something that, everyone is treated equally as far as a distance to protect those resources. Because pretty soon everybody might be able to put a second house in their backyard from the way the law is reading right now. So it's, it's going to get a lot busier around here.
Zoning board was pretty happy that I'd be getting cars off the street,
Yeah. Those houses are close. I do appreciate the fact that you don't have much side yard there. It's just it's a tough area.
So I guess I would ask.
I have a question. I mean, I've fit 2 cars in 24 feet. Why do you need 53 to fit 3 cars?
We're adding 10 feet onto the inside of the existing house, and then there's about an 8-foot spot. He said that would be, kind of excessive underneath the addition. I have a golf cart and a lawnmower, a riding tractor that I was figuring would go into that area, and then the 3 cars.
If you get rid of that 8 feet, you're right on the right number, and you can build a shed at the end of the driveway.
Well,
I guess I would ask one more thing. I did mention earlier the possibility of reducing that 50 feet in exchange for some sort of mitigation or environmental benefit. Is there
I'm sorry,
something-
could you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, is there something that the commission would want or accept, in exchange for a reduced setback to the wetland, some sort of mitigation or environmental benefit that could offset the additional 7 feet?
What did you have in mind?
Well, we've done things anywhere from planting, anywhere from markers that Mark, no further disturbance back there. Those are probably the two most common things that we've done.
That's a little bit backwards in that you're talking about taking down a magnificent 200-year-old tree, and then you're going to talk about planting some shrubs. That
We've done it
doesn't work
before.
for me.
Yeah.
I think what the chairwoman was saying earlier is that we're up against a lot of similar asks
Yeah,
in the
I
future.
understand.
Not only what we've seen in the past, but we've got a lot coming. This will be a trade-off that loses us the 50-foot no build zone,
Okay, I just figured I would ask.
which I guess I'll wait until after this.
So this is a notice of intent, it is a public hearing, and if there's no questions at the moment from the board, we can open it up to the public. Is there anyone that would like to ask a question or comment on this particular proposal? 191 Frida Lane. Anyone want to speak for or against? Okay, well, then I guess we're either at the point of closing the public hearing, or if the applicant would want to request a continuance to try to rework the plan a little, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's what we want to do, is kind of look at this, see what our options are, come back. So we would want to request a continuance.
Would you need, we have a meeting in 2 weeks, which means you would have to have a proposal in probably, 5 days to get it in on time? Which might be a little fast.
Correct, yes.
So perhaps, we only have one meeting in July, so you perhaps would want to aim for that.
I think we'd want to do the 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yep.
Okay. So, could we have a motion to continue at the request of the applicant until our June 28th meeting?
So moved.
Seconded? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
We'll see you in 2 weeks. Okay, we have a request for a determination of applicability from the Mass Department of Conservation and Recreation. The project location is the VFW Highway, somewhat near the Beaver Brook. And we're seeking approval for a soil remediation and soil capping project. Welcome. Could you
Hi,
identify yourself, please?
Yes, for the record, my name is Peter Backus, B-A-C-K-H-A-U-S, with Tyne Bond. I'm a project environmental scientist there, here on behalf of the applicant, the Mass DCR. With the bridge on the VFW Parkway going in the past couple of years there, as part of the preparation for that, MassDOT soil sampled the adjacent properties, and as part of the building of the VFW Parkway in the 50s, they used asbestos fill, among other materials in there, that were found on all 4 properties. MassDOT was then required to report this, as they found asbestos in the fill, and that puts the onus on the landowners adjacent there to remediate the soil. So as part of the bridge project, MassDOT has gone ahead and already remediated some of the soil immediately in the area of the bridge. They've put down new riprap, they've capped it, and this is all on a DCR parcel, but there is a little sliver that is outside of the jurisdiction of their current permits, so DCR would like to clean up and cap that last bit that is on the sliver of their land adjacent to the city property along the river there. So it's about 1,500 square feet. It's going to go adjacent to a new pedestrian path that's coming off the bridge and heading down to the Riverwalk along the city area there. And so between the Riverwalk and the VFW Parkway, there's like a 1,500-foot triangle you saw RDA, and they're basically going to put geotextile over it, except for one small area that had a high contamination of lead. They are going to excavate that area under a Mass DEP permit, and then they will backfill that, cover the area with the geotextile, and about anywhere from 18 inches to 3 feet of soil, depending on the conditions necessary for the grading and for what the city and MassDOT are doing on the other side. So fairly simple project, just 1,500 square feet of capping the soil. And it does remove one large tree, then a few smaller trees, and they are open and willing to possibly planting trees if necessary. But this will also have an AUL put on it in the end, so that nobody can develop there, nobody can dig. It'll just be a passive recreation area, essentially. So yes, we are looking for a negative determination on the project there. It is within the 100-foot buffer zone to inland bank.
Okay, so are you removing any of the contaminated materials?
No, since this is asbestos,
Okay,
it's
just
best to cap
cap
it, leave it in place, but they do have to dig out, it's 2 to 3 cubic yards where there is high lead concentration.
So you're changing the elevation of the area?
Yes, and they've already done, MassDOT did part of that with the bridge already. They've already changed it. The pedestrian path needs to be regraded for ADA accessibility for the path that's going in. So they DCR will be matching that, as well as whatever the city ends up doing in the long run on their parcel.
So the path will be recreated once you're finished, or it won't go over this particular parcel? The walking?
So it's all one large parcel, but it's within the purview of MassDOT's already underway permit. So DCR has no control over really what's going on that side, because that's all.
Okay, so you're not preventing people from traversing the rest of the river on that side?
It's been capped. That area has been, as part of the bridge project, has been capped already.
So
and,
people can walk on it
yeah,
when
it's
you're
safe.
done?
Yeah, it's got a few,
But you
as I said, anywhere from like 1.5 to 3 feet of fill on top of it with a geotextile membrane beneath, so they can't dig in there either.
But you couldn't plant trees right on that remediation area, could you?
It's possible. It has to be discussed. There's possibilities of doing it because it doesn't necessarily ruin the geotextile. I did ask about that. That would have to work out with Mass DEP and what they want to do as far as how they do the contamination, the asbestos, off-site permit and all that. But they would like the least amount disturbed if possible. So maybe some shallow root herbaceous and probably some shrubs would come in. That it's a very thick geotextile that goes on, so that nobody can accidentally dig into the asbestos. So trees may be limited shallow roots. So it would probably be shrubs. And long term, I think they would just allow it to be passive. They wouldn't necessarily mow it, maybe every so often cut trees back and all that. But that's all to be determined with the Mass DEP permit.
Questions, comments? When is your time frame, and how long will it take to do this project?
I think they're waiting on just MassDOT to wrap up like the path part of it, but I believe the end of summer, early fall is what it was, and it would only take a couple weeks because it's just laying the fabric and covering it essentially, except for the small excavation area, which would be a day or two. Really depends on how they can get the contaminated soil trucked off and all that too. All those logistics would have to be worked out, but fairly quick once it starts.
That whole area has really been disturbed for a long, long time with that construction project. Is that all going to be smoothed out and replanted and fixed up?
I'm not too familiar with the MassDOT side of it, but I did look, I wasn't on the site visit, but I was sent some pictures and stuff like that, and it does look like what they have put with the riprap next to the bridge, and then that slope next to it where the path currently dead ends at the bridge, that I think is final graded. I think the rest of it is coming with the path, but they are limited with what's in the soil. Though on the MassDOT part, they do have a little more leeway.
So is this going to include some erosion control along the riverside?
Yes, there's a bunch in there already from MassDOT, and they will be putting some others in. This, again, we're waiting on the best DEP permit, but any wattles needed on the slope that you think your purview, you're welcome to come out as well for a site visit once they get to working on that part. Anywhere you think wattles, silt fence might be needed. We definitely want the area stabilized with that new grade.
And as of right now, the final stabilization will be loam and seed.
Yes. And with straw mulch originally.
You expect that would be done before this fall, perhaps?
Yes, I think they're aiming for, from what I heard, like mid-August. They'd like to be out of there earlier if possible, especially getting the seed in for the fall, get some germination before the winter.
Okay, I don't see too many downsides to this particular proposal. Anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to grant this project a -3 determination.
Motion for a -3. We have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
And one abstention. Okay, motion passes. We'll issue that -3 for our new commissioners. This means we think it's within our jurisdiction, but it's not going to harm the resource if it's done the way they are proposing. So thank you for coming in.
Hopefully an improvement, and actually one thing with the seeding, hopefully a wildflower mix or something of that. So a little better than
I'd
the
like
current
that.
rock and grass. So
That'd be wonderful, yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's the end of our written agenda. We have an other business here. Is there any other business?
Nothing to report other than the minutes. We have a Lowell Forward forum 1 week from today at 6:30 p.m. at the Lowell Senior Center. We'll be reviewing potential growth strategies in the city based on what we've heard from folks so far. So thinking about how we need growth as a city to be able to fund improvements, what we would like that growth to look like. So I'd encourage anyone on the commission and any folks watching to attend that meeting if they'd like to provide their ideas on how we should be growing as a city.
One other, the city will also be providing training for the urban tree inventory master plan
Oh, yeah.
on July 25th. That's a Sunday from 1 to 4 at North Common. Lowell Litter Crew has also added a shorter training as part of our, it's turning into the summer concert series on the same day, the 25th, from 12 to 12:45 at Armory Park, which is where our cleanup and concert will be that day. So you have two options on Sunday, the 25th, 12 to 12:45 at Armory Park and 1 to 4 at North Common.
Are people then going to go off on their own in inventory? Is that the way it is once they're trained?
I believe that the 3-hour main inventory training is to survey the entirety of North Common and also provide
Oh, I
people with
see.
that opportunity to go out into the field. I felt
Do
like
they have
Litter Crew is a
areas
great group.
marked off where they want to know what's there, or are they just doing public parks?
I know everything that I just told you, and that's about it.
Okay. Don't ask any more questions.
Yeah, you can email Sophie Mortimer if you'd want to pick her brain. She's their contact.
Okay, we have minutes here from the May 24th meeting. Did we miss doing the minutes? Has anyone had a chance to look those over?
Yeah, I looked down, and I think it was good. So I'll make a motion to approve the May 24th minutes.
Okay, Perry makes a motion. Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's the end of our regular agenda, and our next meeting will be the 28th of June. Thank you. Motion to adjourn? Made? Seconded? All those in favor? Good night.
Because I forgot to